Hi, this is John with Performance Plus Tennis. Welcome to today's lesson on the modern forehand. And we're going to review and compare the modern versus the classic forehand and help you decide what is best for you to optimize your performance on your forehand. And of course, in recent times, in recent years, there's been a lot of discussions and a lot of reviews on the modern forehand technique. And we've seen a lot of the top players adopt what we call the modern forehand technique. We see Federer doing it, we see Nadal doing it, and other players. And is that really the right thing for most recreational players to be doing with their forehand? In today's lesson, we're going to break all that down and guide you through the steps of the forehand that's going to help you not only with your power, but your consistency and your confidence in your forehand to make it an optimal weapon on the tennis court. First, let's compare and contrast the classic forehand with what's considered the modern forehand. The classic forehand, which most players have been playing for many, many years at high levels, is really where we make a unit turn and the racket is above the hand here, and we're creating this loop, this classic loop in the stroke. And we get up here, the racket's above the hand, it's a longer movement, and the racket drops in behind the ball and then comes forward to play the shot. And the modern forehand is a little bit different now. We're actually you see players will still take it up, but instead of taking it back and creating this circle behind and having length behind the body, you see players like Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal and others where they'll just drop the racket right into the slot right here, and the racket will be in this position and it'll be literally horizontal. It'll be completely closed, and then they'll lag it from there. So they're creating a lot of torque in the body, and the racket is alongside the hand, and it goes behind the hand and comes out and plays the shot. So those are really the big key differences that you see visually between the classic forehand and the modern forehand. So what are the advantages of the classic forehand? Well, I think first off is simplicity. It's a very simple move when you make a unit turn and the racket's above the hand, and then you can adjust the system to the height of the ball and the spin you want to create on your shot. And it makes it a very clean pass on the ball that's very, very reliable and very easy to develop. So for me, I think that the classic forehand is a much easier forehand for most recreational and club level players to master than the modern forehand, because the modern forehand has nuances in it and movements that really require a tremendous sense of timing and a lot of skill. And for most rec players, we just don't have the time to put in hours and hours to try and achieve that level of timing and get that nuance figured out on that modern forehand. So I think the classic forehand is a much better choice because of the pure simplicity of it, where there could be some lag in here, but the lag is it's natural. You're not really trying to create much lag. It can occur. I have a little bit of lag in my forehand, but it's not something that I'm really trying to do with this stroke. And it really does connect the swing with the torso. So it's a very nice connected movement that is pretty easy for most recreational players to achieve. So what are the advantages of this modern forehand we're seeing so many players use today? And for one thing, the backswing is much more compact. So it's much more efficient in terms of the length of swing to the ball, and the way the game is being played today with the speed, that is helping players get to contact much more. So we're really seeing a more compact swing on this side. What I think the disadvantage really is that it's pretty tricky, especially again for club and recreational level players, is that you'll see these players, whether it's Jack Sock or Federer, you'll see that the racket is completely closed here. So there's a lot of angle change that needs to occur between this position and when they get to contact. And that little movement right there can be pretty tricky to time. So I think it really lends itself to a player who's very, very gifted or is practicing a ton so they can really master that skill. And I do think even with the classic forehand, you can keep it fairly compact. It doesn't have to get lengthy to be effective. But definitely in the modern one, the idea here is to keep the racket right here with you and generate the racket head speed through the lag and then the extension out through contact. But it is a much more difficult shot to master. The other characteristic of the modern forehand that we see are players making contact much more in front than they used to. And I think that's because the swing doesn't go back far and it really drops right next to the body. They have to get length into the swing to get out to contact. And you'll see Roger Federer makes contact with his Eastern forehand grip more in front than any player in history. You know, historically, with the Eastern forehand grip, players are playing the ball in this area here. Well, you see him now. He's lagging, and he's way out in front. And I think that's a very difficult thing to do for most players. It requires a lot of timing and a lot of flexibility, and it's quite difficult of a movement to make. And all of these players that I mentioned really create more of a looping effect where the racket rises and drops in, creates a loop or a circle in the back to approach to the ball. In contrast, in the modern forehand that we're seeing Roger Federer play with now and Rafael Nadal, they'll lift the racket up on the take back, but then they'll drop it into an abbreviated position with the racket really closed. And then they rely on the rotation and the lag of the racket and then the catch up to create the racket head speed. So you see some players still playing with what I consider to be the classic high performance forehand, and then you see players playing with this more modern abbreviated stroke. It's got a little bit of a trickier movement in it. And when I think of different players that use these different techniques, when I think about the classic high-performance forehand, I think of players like Juan Martín del Potro, David Nalbandian, Roger Federer in his early part of his career. Even Novak Djokovic today, I would consider his forehand to be more of a high-performance forehand and less of the modern technique where the racket is very, very abbreviated, the take-back. You'll see that Novak has a pretty lengthy take-back in his forehand versus a lot of the other players in the game today. When we think about the modern forehand in this current form, we think about Jack Sock, where the racket is really closed down and it's really right next to him, and then he just rotates it right here alongside of him. Roger Federer takes the racket up, but now he's dropping it. So he's not creating this circle that the classic forehand has. Instead, he's just dropping it in, it's completely closed, he's uncoiling, and then the racket's catching up through the lag, and he's making contact way out in front. So those are the distinctions. You can look at different players that are using these different techniques, and this will help you understand what's really going on with these two different forehands. So what is the best forehand for you? And you probably know by now that I'm much more a proponent of the classic performance, high performance forehand that includes a loop in the take back and a very connected swing that is reliable. So for most of you who are probably not playing tennis every single day and practicing and training, the classic forehand in a high-performance format is a much better forehand to be modeling. And you can look back, for example, at Roger Federer's forehand earlier in his career, and I think his forehand was actually better then. I think he hit the ball just as hard. It was much more versatile, and I think he made fewer mistakes than he makes now because the timing is more difficult. So I think the modern forehand is tricky. Unless you're a super high performance player who's practicing all the time, I'll advise that. And I would really try to perfect the foundational skills of the forehand and allow your natural style to evolve. And don't get caught up too much on what the ATP players are doing with these modern forehands, because it's pretty difficult to master if you're a club level player. Thanks for watching today's video, and I hope that this lesson will help you build your forehand into a professional quality weapon. Please like, comment, subscribe to our channel, and please leave your comments down below, and stay tuned for more lessons here at Performance Plus Tennis.